How's everyone doing? I'm really happy to see so many faces here. This is a really wonderful opportunity for the Claremont community, I think, and it's great that those of you who are here have shown up, and we're really happy to see everyone. And just before I get started with anything, wanted to let you know that the session is being recorded. We're recording the session right now. And as I said, it's really beautiful to see so many faces here for this first session of what we're calling Claremont Speaks Black. And it's sponsored by the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Claremont. My name is Derik Smith. I'm a member of the Baha'i community here in Claremont. I've lived in Claremont for about 2 years now. I'm also a professor of literature at Claremont McKenna College, and I'm the current chair of the Africana Studies department at the Claremont colleges. And so I wanted to also let you get a chance to meet Cynthia, who is our moderator as well.
Hi, thanks Derik for introducing me, and I'm really excited about this opportunity. I moved here, it'll be 4 weeks next week, from Evanston, Illinois. I'm actually originally from San Francisco, California. I'm a native Californian, but I moved here from Evanston to be closer to my son and his family who live in Rancho Cucamonga. I'm a retired HR director. I spent about 30 years in human resources, and I'm also a member of the Baha'i faith. And so I was really excited when I was asked to co-moderate with Derik for this really important discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thank you. And before we introduce our guest, Rolondo Talbott, we wanted to say a few words about just the genesis of like this Claremont Speaks Black initiative. And it was born really out of consultation in the Claremont Baha'i community. And in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, and then the subsequent surge of activism around the world about issues of race and anti-Blackness, we felt that it would be beneficial in our local community to create a space where Black voices of Claremont could be heard. And we realized that there were hardly any kind of public forums that would allow for the people of Claremont to come together and simply learn about the perspectives of their fellow Black Claremonters. And that space didn't exist, and or it hardly existed. And we really see this space as an attempt to build that opportunity for this perspective to be shared. And I think one of the things that's critical for us to recognize about this space that we're building is it centers on the Black perspective, but we think that everyone here is integral to the conversation, right? This is about working together to create the best community possible. That's what we feel we'd like to aim for with these series of forums that we're going to have. And maybe some of you will know that the first principle of the Baha'i faith is the oneness of humanity. This guides all of our thinking, all of our beliefs. And we as Baha'is believe that the world desperately needs to acknowledge this oneness, this fact that humankind is all one from one family. And I think that the failure to do this, we as Baha'is believe the failure to do this is really at the root of so many of the problems that we face today at the level of the individual and then going up into the level of the global. And our strong belief that we need to build communities that are founded on a commitment to oneness is what is inspiring us to do all the work that we do. And in the US, I think racism and specifically anti-Blackness is the most vital and challenging issue emerging from our lack of oneness. And Baha'is believe that there's a need to create race unity using means that are unified and loving and also just. And we hope that these forums will enact these kind of principles, and it will allow our community to sort of move toward that authentic unity that Baha'is really feel is necessary and that we work toward. And so obviously, I mean, this maybe goes without saying, but our conversation is meant to be respectful, inclusive, and safe. and also hopefully healing. And all in order to create that, we've done a few things with the Zoom area that we are setting up here. Everyone except for the speakers are muted. And then once we get through our conversation, which will last for about 30 to 40 minutes, then we'll have the chat function on, and you'll be able to share your questions with Cynthia and myself. And when those questions come in, we'll share them with Rolando, and he'll respond as he sees fit. And as I said earlier, you know, this is the first of an ongoing series. And what we hope is that we'll hear from a diverse range of Black voices over the next few months, everyone from retirees to high school students and college students here in Claremont. And so, you know, with that, we wanted to sort of engage the audience really right at the outset here by asking you a question or asking you two questions that you can respond to using your sort of the function that will appear on the screen here momentarily. We have two questions. Are we able to post those up? Oh, there you go. Yeah. So, Cynthia, you want to say a little bit about this question or anything?
Right. The first question is, what is your connection to Claremont?
So this is great. You know, this gives us a sense of who is here and, you know, maybe like the distribution of the kind of investments in the Claremont community that we have in the audience. So that's wonderful. And of course, these questions, you know, there's no way to link your answer to your name using these polls. So we're going to ask you one more question in a moment. So we have about 93% people voted, 95, great voter participation here. So 70% of us live in Claremont, 9% work in Claremont but don't live here. And then we have 22% who are just friends of Claremont. Thank you. Did everyone see those responses? Were you able to see that? Okay, great. And now we have another question as well.
So the second question is, how inclusive is Claremont?
Great. Thanks for responding to that. We have 92% of people responded to that. Looks like the majority of people think, or the most people think in our group think that Claremont is somewhat inclusive. Nice. All right, so that's interesting for us to know, to get a sense of what everyone thinks about the community here. And what I want to do now is introduce Rolando, and it's really an honor to have him here with us. He's the first of the guests on our Claremont Speaks Black Forum. And we found out about Rolando's voice by reading an article, an excellent opinion piece that he published in the Claremont Courier. And in that, he spoke about his various relationships to the city and to the community. And we thought that, you know, this would be an excellent perspective to have and to share at our first session. And Rolando has a incredible biography. I'll try and share just a little bit of it. I'm going to leave a lot of things out because there are so many different elements to our fellow Claremonter here. Rolando is now the Senior Director, Project Manager at Pomona College, and he leads all technology-based projects for the college. He is also a member of the Pomona College President's Advisory Council on Diversity. He's a member of the Pomona College Strategic Planning Committee. Prior to that, he worked at Comcast, NBC, Universal, and he was a senior marketing project manager there, working on blockbuster movies, television shows, even on the Olympics. And he's also a decorated disabled veteran. He served in the Air Force as a combat intelligence officer during Operation Joint Force in Bosnia, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq, as well as being stationed in bases all over the world. He lives in Claremont with his wife, who is an attorney in the city. And in his free time, I don't know where he gets so much of his free time, but he's also a writer. He's been writing books for children, and he also contributes to the LinkedIn articles that some of you may read from time to time. I was able to read an article that he wrote just recently for LinkedIn. It was excellent. And he also has his own coaching, tactical coaching. I believe that's the right, tactical career coaching. Rolando, it's really a pleasure and an honor to have you here with us. Thank you. I think Cynthia was gonna hit you with the first question here.
Okay, so the first question, make sure I was ready, is how long have you lived and worked in Claremont?
Yeah, so before I answer that, I just wanted to say, thank you to all of you who have joined and participated in the first of what will hopefully prove to be many great conversations that are long overdue in this city. And so I'm glad it's starting. I'm honored and humbled to be a part of the first one. And again, I just want to thank all of you for being part of this conversation and the many more to come. So it's just shy of about 7 years living here in Claremont. I've worked with Pomona for about 3 years, as I think in my bio, which kind of made me exhausted hearing all those things I was doing. I need to reprioritize some things, but I was commuting from Claremont via the metro to Hollywood every day, and I sort of felt that was greatly decreasing my quality of life. So really, I was interested in working here locally and having more time for my family and things of that nature. So yeah, I've been with the college now for about 3 years.
Okay. I have a follow-up question, Derik, if it's all right. Since this pertains to me, how would you describe Claremont to a Black friend who doesn't know much about this city?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, it all depends, right? So I think, Cynthia, my new friend, you just moved here. I think I would have a very different conversation than I would have with somebody who maybe is just coming here for dinner and visiting the city. I think, if you were just a casual visitor, I'd want to make sure that, I highlight the best parts of the city, maybe point you to my favorite place to eat, where I've had a great experience, or maybe a place to go to see, beautiful nature that we have, or some of the best things about Claremont. If you were maybe thinking about moving here, we'd have a different conversation about maybe where are some of the great areas to live that kind of meet your needs and things like that. I think the bottom line, though, in anything is really sharing with you my experiences in Claremont and having you understand my perspective and where you're coming from. And that's really what I call sort of building that community, which I hope to build with you in the future as being new to Claremont, and really helping you understand that this is a place where you can thrive, where you can be your authentic self, where you can find a community of those of like minds that you can converse with and become great friends with. And so that's what I would hope that I'd be able to relay to you and show you examples of where that community exists. But yeah, I think that's how I'd answer it for you.
Rolondo, I was wondering if you yourself were responding to that poll. I know it's, you know, there's not much chance to sort of insert subtlety or nuance into the options that we had there, you know. But if you were thinking about sort of inclusivity in Claremont, you know, what things or how would you respond to that question, and then how might you sort of elaborate on your thinking about inclusivity here in our city?
Yeah, I think in my personal opinion, and just from based off my experiences of living here for a number of years now, I think Claremont, and I think I said this in my article for the Courier, it's a place of great potential. No place is perfect. As I mentioned, I've lived all around the world and in large cities, small cities, you know, and what has always impressed me about Claremont and why I feel why I have such an affinity for Claremont is because of the potential of what Claremont can be. I think it's well on its way. I think there's things that have to be improved, obviously. But yeah, so I think in that question, you know, certainly are there areas where I think inclusivity is the main goal? Absolutely. Do I think there's some areas where it's left to be desired? Certainly. But I think, you know, there's definitely room and opportunity and desire by the folks that have joined here to make Claremont fulfill its potential of becoming a really great city.
So I could follow up. And you want to ask a question, Cynthia?
No, you go ahead, please go ahead.
I was wondering, you know, not to put you sort of too much on the hot seat here, but like, you know, you said there are some things that are, you know, that are really inclusive, you know, like you feel like very positive about, and then others less so. I mean, I think maybe I'd be interested in knowing, like, what are your feelings about, you know, where we as a community are doing well, you know, where are some of the places that we need to make improvement as you described it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in a multitude of areas. I mean, I just by looking at some of the folks that are here on the Zoom, I know a lot of you, and you know, you've been gracious in welcoming me and my family to Claremont, and we've built community and we've built relationships, and I think that's part of it, right? That you know, grassroots, if you will, at the citizen level, which I think is great, and I think that's been very, you know, inclusive. We've been made to feel welcome by a lot of those folks that are on the Zoom right now. I think some of the areas where the city can do better are in how we get people involved in being part of the decision-making process and being part of the policies, how we staff our commissions, how we get folks involved in some of the volunteering aspects. I think one of the benefits of Claremont being a small city is you get the opportunity to know some amazing people. I think one of the challenges of Claremont being a small city is that you find those same people involved in a lot of other things. And I think for some areas that can leave out, you know, people who are really interested in making a difference and serving or whatever their motivation is, that those opportunities aren't always available or even known. So I think those are just some of the very, very few areas where, you know, we can look to make this city more inclusive.
Great, thanks.
Let's see. Let's see, what are 3 changes you would like to see maybe that would make you feel, I mean, you've already said you feel included, so this is kind of, it might be a kind of, but I'm just thinking as a new person, you know, who's just moved here, one of the things there, I always look for markers, you know, of whether I feel welcome, like whether how people speak to me, or, you know, and I have to say that I didn't see that many African Americans or people of African descent, except for the Baha'is that I know. So can you maybe drill down and think of 3 things? You did mention involvement in decision-making and staffing commissions and volunteering. Is that all? I mean, can you think of some other things? Because I think that's a big issue. That's being part of the process of living in a community is being involved in the policy making. So maybe you could explore more about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, I think I reframe it a little bit. So instead of changes, I sort of look at areas of improvement, right? So I kind of talked about Claremont having that potential. So I see as part of that potentiality within Claremont, the ability to improve things. And so, yeah, I think, you know, one of the key things are having more forums like this, more opportunities to dialogue. If anything, I'd like to see, I think it would be impactful if the city were to sponsor spaces like this as well, to show that at a city level, these type of dialogues, these type of conversations are something they support. But in the meantime, having these type of conversations, I think, are absolutely crucial, so that people can be heard and we can engage with one another. Definitely making the city, the commission, the opportunities to volunteer more accessible and open and transparent, I think, is a big key. Oftentimes folks ask me, how did I become a commissioner? And about 10 minutes into my story, I realized that's a big marker of not being very inclusive, because it's going to take me that long to just explain the process that it took for me to become a commissioner. And I think there's things that we can do to, if you have that desire to serve or be a part of, you know, the conversation, that we can make that available and make that known. We have 2 major elections coming up, one for the school board, which is going to be very important of how we kind of go into this new normal of online schooling, and we have council seats up. Getting involved with those, getting to know our candidates, participating, those type of things. I think really, if we can figure out ways to make that more inclusive and draw more of the larger voice of the city, I think those are great. And then lastly, I think it's what we're doing now, but more on the grassroots level, is just getting to know one another, listening to our stories, you know, building that sense of community, speaking to, you know, your neighbors and getting to know, you know, us and what we have to offer and what stories we have, and really getting, I know it's difficult in this pandemic world, but, you know, doing the best we can to sort of build those relationships, I think just makes us stronger as a community. So those are the things that I'd like to see kind of at a high level sort of improved on our path to reaching our potential as a city.
If I could just follow up on that one, Rolando. Sorry, Cynthia, sorry. You know, I mean, I think part of what I envision for this forum is like really getting to know people, you know, a bit better, right? Sort of understanding, you know, the thinking of our neighbors and so forth. And, you know, like I asked a few people to sort of join in on this forum, a few of my friends who are Black, and at least one of them said to me, you know, I really don't want to be part of it because of a sense of anger, you know, and this person didn't want to have that kind of enter into the space in that way. And, you know, your perspective is really one of sort of looking for potential and opportunities and so forth. And I'm really interested in knowing, I think maybe other people would want to know, like, you know, where does that come from in you? You know, like what gives you that kind of, you know, that perspective of hope and potential, to see potential for change, and also that kind of that desire to be engaged in this, you know, in a really obvious way. You know, your participation on the police commissioners board, right? I mean, that was an effort on your part to become engaged. You know, you were speaking to me earlier about issues having to do with the school board and so forth. So I'm interested in knowing a little bit about, like, you know, where does that sort of sense of your being part of a community, where does that come from? Can you locate that in your own kind of experience, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so part of it is just, you know, was ingrained in who I am. I'm 3rd generation military. The idea of the concept of service before self was something that was just ingrained in me very small. Oh, when I was small, my father is a retired police officer. So I had that aspect too of just kind of knowing service and what that meant. but also kind of being able to see the benefit of that type of service. And so that's always, I think, just been a part of me. Anywhere that I've lived, I've wanted to engage. I think if anything, it's more of a personal challenge for me if the engagement is in an environment where there aren't people that look like me, or there aren't people that are speaking to my specific needs or goals or desires. And so for me, Claremont represented one of those avenues of opportunity where, you know, I didn't see anybody who looked like me. I didn't see anybody who was saying the type of things that I would hope to have heard. And so in the absence of that, you know, I saw that as an opportunity to serve and insert myself into those processes. And so I think it's just a constant looking of where I can be of service. You know, you kind of read my bio, and I forget sometimes of all the things that have got going on, but that's really where all that comes from. Is it's just, you know, it's I joke with myself that I have a hard time saying no to things, and I think that's part of it. Is, you know, there is this just desire to want to participate and belong. Even when you approached me, it was just, you know, I think I responded like really quickly. I was like, yeah, let's do it. You know, it was just, I didn't think about like, okay, you know, what's the logistics behind it. It's just like, let's do this. Let's get it done. So you know, but I think where my hopefulness is that I see that potential in a lot of, I mean, I see that right here with, you know, the 56 people who are on this meeting right now, that there's people who have a desire to want to be engaged and want to have these type of conversations. So to me, that gives me, you know, hope, you know, and optimism that there are things, you know, with the help of everybody that we can make better. So I guess that's really where it comes from. I do want to clarify though, and I completely sympathize with your friend who didn't feel that they could be in a type of space like this, because there is that, I think, especially as Black men, we have that duplicity within ourselves where you are very angry. You know, I can be very angry when I, you know, even within Claremont where I don't feel included, or I don't feel like I belong, and that anger does boil up. But again, it's that balance where I participate in things like this and I see who's attended, and that makes me feel like, okay, this is going to be okay. We can, you know, we can work with this. This is something that we can improve upon. And so I think it's always a constant balance for me. It's always a state of flux, but I think that's just where it comes from, is really the desire to want to be of service and make change.
One thing I'm interested in, Rolondo, is you've worked in the corporate environment, now you're in the academic environment. What kinds of tools or skills have you used or applied to be successful in those? And they're very different environments. But I'm
oh no, they're exactly the same. I'm just kidding. Really? They're night and day. No, they are night and day. And to be honest, it took me probably a good year to sort of switch my head and thinking from a corporate, and I would almost argue that entertainment is in its own sort of world. Right. But yeah, from a corporate sort of thinking to higher education. I hate to be repetitive, but it was service. One of the things I got involved in within my first month at Pomona was getting appointed to the President's Advisory Council on Diversity. And it was just like, sure, I don't have a higher education background, but yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll be a part of this and lend my voice and represent those on this committee. And that was how I learned. That's how I sort of understood the environment. I'm still learning. I'm only 3 years at Pomona, so I wouldn't profess to say I know it all, but through that service, through that willingness to be a part of the conversation and in my innate inability to say no to things, you know, once they find somebody who's willing to raise their hand, you get pulled into more and more directions. And so, but I think through that, I've been able to have an influence on the strategic planning of the college and kind of what the next 20 years of the college is. And that's an opportunity I would have never had at Pomona had I not raised my hand and volunteered and wanted to be part of that conversation. So yeah, I just, you know, I think, you know, that's how I sort of adjusted, but I think the things that are sort of universal between all the different jobs. So I've worked in retail to defense to for-profit education, to Hollywood, to here at Pomona. Those things, are at least equal across the board for me is that desire and that acceptance for somebody who wants to be of service, right? Nobody's going to turn down somebody who wants to take on more and to serve. And so that has always been sort of the way I've looked at it is I'll put myself out there. If I meet it, great. If not, no worries. But that usually has opened doors for me to then find success and to find more opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have kind of like two different questions in mind right now. One goes in one direction. I think the other goes in another direction. So I'm kind of interested, in how you feel about sort of like walking around in Claremont, right? So like, I don't know, like I'm never quite sure if like where I fall on the spectrum of this kind of sort of sense of space, right? So like if I go out and I'm a kind of person, I like to walk, I'll just go, walking and so forth. But I don't really like to walk in Claremont like without like my family or without my dog. Like I found that my dog, I have a very sort of very small dog, not very threatening at all. I found that when I take my dog with me on certain in places, I feel very comfortable. It helps me feel comfortable. But if I'm walking alone, I feel a kind of that I may invite a kind of attention, that maybe, lead to things that I don't want to sort of happen, So do you experience that? So that's one thing I'm wondering about. And then my next question is, and maybe you can, sort of tie these together somehow. You seem like the kind of person who could probably do that. Is, you're very familiar, with our police department, right? Because of your work on the police commission. And of course, there's so much that has happened recently in, bringing our attention to issues of race and to anti-Blackness and so forth because of the way in which police departments operate in our country, essentially, right? And the murder of Floyd at the hands of police officers and so forth. So I'm wondering, if you can speak on two of those things. One from a kind of very personal perspective, and then the other from a kind of, element of looking at city governance. Like, what do you think we're doing in terms of our police department and how that is going? I'm sure many people will be interested in hearing about that.
Sure. Well, I'll take kind of the comfort that you expressed first, and it's a question that I get often because I hear that a lot. I hear I hear that exact same scenario that you just sort of laid forth. I've been thinking about it sort of in preparation for this conversation because it is, I think you probably explained it a lot better than I could, because it is difficult to explain unless you've actually go through something like that and have to go through sort of the mental gymnastics of doing something as simple as taking a walk, right? And I share with you the same sort of strategic planning, if you will, when it comes to something like that. Do we go with the kids? Do I just go with my wife? What route do we take? Those type of things. The best that I could do to kind of explain the way it makes me feel is through an analogy. So I'll ask you all to bear with me as I kind of walk through this, and you keep me honest, Derik, if it's not making sense. But this is just the way I think of it. I think that most people in Claremont, most white people in Claremont, and I think of like a day like this today where it's beautiful and it's sunny and it's nice and warm. You may go outside in a t-shirt or some shorts, maybe flip-flops, because that's what you feel comfortable in. That's that you look good. You're cool. I think for me, I start off wearing the t-shirt, and again, I'm using a metaphor and analogy here. I start off wearing the t-shirt and the shorts, but then I think about, well, I need to take a different route because I don't want anybody to look at me weird. So I put on my proverbial sweater, right? And I button my sweater up because that's going to make me feel a little bit more comfortable. But then I think about, but I also want to go get some ice cream, and maybe I'm not feeling too comfortable getting ice cream. So I put on my pants, right? Before you know it, I've got 15 layers of clothes on to protect myself just before I go outside. Now, I'd ask you, would you feel comfortable on a 90+ day heat to go take a walk or go get some ice cream with 15 layers of clothes on, right? You wouldn't feel comfortable. But that's my daily reality, if that makes sense, if I'm bringing that home. So I seek to go places and experience places where I don't have to wear 15 layers of clothing. And it's a challenge sometimes, if I'm being honest, specifically in Claremont, to find a place where I'm not overheating from the weight and the stress of what it takes to just be in that space. And so I think that's the easiest way that I can sort of conceptualize it in my head. I just want to wear a shirt, shorts, and flip-flops and go get ice cream because it's hot and I want to enjoy the weather. But I recognize that I can't all the time. And that's a burden that's difficult to explain. That's a burden I want to shelter from my children to ever have to feel that way. And so that translates directly into my work on the police commission, because I do, again, sticking with the theme of potentiality within the city, we have the potential, especially with our chief and the work that she's doing and the willingness to work with us and her desire to see a better police department, to make those changes, to understand, to listen to those lived experiences and work together and be open to all suggestions and do that collaboratively. Again, gives me hope, gives me where I base the potential of what we're trying to do here, because there is that openness. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Rolondo. I love the analogy. It's very powerful.
Thank you. And can I piggyback? I'm flowing here on the head, so forgive me. Just thinking, I talked a little bit earlier about your friend's anger and understanding. I think for me, that's where my source of anger comes from, is the thought that I'm wearing 15 layers of clothes to just go and walk when it shouldn't be that way, right? Or to go get ice cream. It should not be that way. It absolutely shouldn't be that way. And I think for me, that's where the anger comes from, because you take a step back and you realize, ironically, I'm wearing 100 pounds of clothing to do something that my neighbors can do whenever they feel like it, right? And so that is the challenge, I think, when I talk about that duplicity of thought. That is the challenge. So in my service, that's what's always in the back of my head is, can for the marginalized communities within Claremont, can we get them to, if you stick with my analogy, be able to just walk around with t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops on whenever they want to? And if I can do a small part in helping achieve that, then great. That's kind of my thought on that.
Great, thanks, Rolondo. I see, Linda, you have your hand raised. We're gonna do a couple more questions, and then we're gonna go into a Q&A session where people will get a chance to ask their questions. We just have the moderators here just have a couple more questions for Rolondo. My question had to do, I know, you shared with me, I hope you don't mind me sharing, that you have children, and I have children as well. They're here in the Claremont Unified School District. And again, this goes back to sort of me soliciting people to sort of join us for this conversation. And there was one woman who I thought she lived in Claremont, because we really want to focus on people who are living in Claremont for this forum. But in fact, she didn't. And she said to me that one of the reasons that she doesn't live in Claremont, although she works here, is that she wanted her children to go to a more diverse school, which I think that she was able to find in Pomona. And so I was wondering about some of the thoughts that you may have in terms of, being a parent, right? Or, being involved in the school district here. Do you have any kind of, insights or feelings, having been here for a while now, about what it's like to raise your children here?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the biggest areas where, again, I see the potential, but there's a lot of work to do. As I think some of you on this call know, I'm a board member of the Claremont Education Foundation, and so we do a lot of work with the schools as well. And I think that is an area, as I mentioned before, we have school board elections. really reaching out to those candidates and having your voice heard, I think is really going to be key. I think you'll find the candidates receptive to that, but I think that's really key, especially as we go into this new, whatever this is going to be in the fall, for our children. Now is a time to really have that voice be heard in terms of education. I have a rising first grader and a rising seventh grader. And I think I'll tell this one really, really brief story because it was something that was sort of impactful for my family. But, my daughter had, during Black History Month, her school, they did some really great displays for Black history, and they paired off in teams, and it was sort of a visual demonstration through research and all those type of things, and they had them displayed in the school. And one of the things that we noticed that was kind of interesting is we had Dr. Martin Luther King, we had Rosa Parks, we had what I would call kind of the, your stereotypical, when you think of Black History Month, you think of those 6 or 7 names. And so for my daughter, and this kind of piggybacks off some of the children's books that I write, I wanted her to choose somebody who's not in their textbooks. I wanted them to choose somebody who maybe her teacher had asked her, who was this person and what was their impact on history. And so I think when it comes to those type of things, I think we can challenge ourselves in the school to be a little bit more open to the amount of diversity and information that this city we've got tremendous intellectual capital in this city, and our children can benefit from that. And I think that's one of the big driving forces of moving to Claremont. I think our school districts can utilize that more. And I think, again, getting involved, my role in part of CEF is sort of that idea, is getting involved and understanding how the school districts work. And that's just one small example of where, we can maybe do a little bit better and give our kids, the best education possible. Yeah, the diversity thing is tough. African Americans in the city alone are just 5.2%, I think, as of the recent census. So, having, my children be the only Black children in their class is difficult, but we kind of work through that through dialogue, being very involved in the school and know what's going on, and making our presence known. I think our ways, and the school is really receptive. I don't want to make it sound like we're kind of pushing our way through this. The schools are really receptive, and I think that's key too of our involvement and kind of having these type of discussions.
Wonderful.
A question that just came up for me from what you were talking about is, and maybe you have some insight on this. What are the economic, or do you have any idea of the economic demographics of Claremont? You said that someone had suggested, or I guess maybe it was Derik, that they wanted to be in a more diverse school district, so they moved to Pomona. Are there barriers to living here? Is Claremont considered a target of gentrification? Is it more, I'm just trying to get a sense of why are your children the only, or maybe one of the few Black children in the school?
I can't speak to specific, numbers and kind of the socioeconomic. I do know the city does put a lot of that information out, and I'm sure that's readily available. I think, I think a lot of what we're talking about today when it comes to inclusivity and kind of understanding, Claremont, for a lot of folks might have misconceptions about Claremont, or they might have very strong opinions about Claremont, and they don't, you kind of, I had mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I joined the police commission was because I didn't see anybody who looked like me or spoke to the things I was interested in. Oftentimes representation matters, and I'm just thinking of this quick analogy story in my head that kind of drives it home for me. My daughter's doing a virtual camp, And she joined the virtual camp and noticed that all the kids were older than she was, and immediately felt self-conscious and didn't want to attend the camp. And it was like that quick. And I think for a lot of people, when you come into a city like Claremont and you don't see people who look like you across the board, whether it's in the town, whether it's in, you know, municipal government, no matter where it is, I think your natural sort of desire is to be in a place that feels a bit more representative. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. You know, I do know, and we have a lot of Claremont residents here. You know that the cost of living here, even though we're LA County, can be a bit prohibitive for a lot of people. So, you know, I think there's a lot of challenges in that. But I think with those challenges, it's incumbent upon all of us to still make those voices heard, because we have such a swath of demographics within the city that oftentimes go underrepresented within these conversations, because they aren't part of, you know, a particular neighborhood, or they aren't in a particular school, but their voices obviously as valuable as anyone else's. So I think there's still more work to do in that space for sure.
Rolondo, I know that, you know, I could go on asking you question after question. I mean, your responses are really sort of illuminating, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of things that I would learn from you personally. But I think we did want to give it over to the audience so that they could share with us some of the questions that they might have. As those in the audience kind of prepare the questions that they might put to Rolondo, we also have another a poll for you that is just basically informational in terms of, you know, we want to know where, how you found out about the, you know, about the forum, just so that we can do a better job of perhaps reaching out to more members of the community going forward. So as we give Rolondo a little bit of a break here, if you could look at this, we've got a whole bunch of different options here. And if you could respond to that, we'd really appreciate that. We really appreciate, you know, you taking the time to respond. And as we said, you know, we'll try and use this little bit of information to make sure that we get more people involved at the next gathering. And so while you're doing that, if you fill that in already, what you can do is, I think now we're gonna open up the chat so that you can send questions to Cynthia and I. So if you have a question that you'd like Rolondo to respond to, please put that in the chat now, and then we'll give those over to Rolondo. A lot of people found out by word of mouth. Excellent. So maybe before this point, it wasn't possible to send the chat, but now you should be able to send the chat to me or Cynthia. We've got our first question in here. This may be kind of straightforward or not. I'm not sure, Rolondo. Is driving while Black an issue in Claremont?
Driving while Black an issue in Claremont. how do I answer this? I don't. I think it's you got to recognize it is an issue for some, right? And I think part of, again, the work on the police commission is, for those instances where, someone feels like they're driving while black, those are incidents we want to hear about. Those are incidents that should be reported, and so that we can, as a commissioner, look into those type of things. I can't say personally that I've experienced that, certainly in other cities. I think, if anything, being the son of a police officer, I'm more hyper aware of certain behaviors. But that is not anything that I've experienced in the city of Claremont. But that's not to say that others haven't. And so, as a commissioner, those are the type of things that I'm extremely interested in knowing, so that we can get to the bottom of it and understand it. And I'm sure the chief would as well. So yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's a problem, but if it is, that's definitely something that I would want to work with, and deal with, for sure.
Thanks, Rolando.
For some reason, I'm not seeing the questions on Derik. I'm not
You're not
seeing
getting them?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'm not sure how the chat is set up, but I have a few coming in here.
Okay.
I can ask a few more if you're not getting any there.
Oh, I see. One just popped up. Yeah, I see it now. Okay, so the questions to you, Rolando, are: do your kids feel like they have enough friends of color in the schools? And do you feel that the answer to this question affects their well-being or academic performance?
I don't. So I think we have certainly supplemented our kids with friends of color that don't necessarily are in their class, plus, family members and things like that. Again, I think it's just a straight numbers game. At 5.2%, they're only going to have, access and exposure to a certain amount of friends. Now, that's not to say that they have good friends of other races and backgrounds. They absolutely do. But specifically, if the question was of color, no, they don't. And I think, it's important to my wife and I to make sure that their friends are diversified. So we do have friends that don't go to school with them, that it's really important that they spend time with, especially in this new sort of digital age where we can feel, the kids don't have that sense of community on the playground and in the classroom that they once had. Making sure that we keep that going is very, very important to us. Do I feel like it's been a detriment in the classroom? Well, it's sort of like the story I gave, I felt the school did a really good job talking about, Martin Luther King, but it was something that, she's probably going to hear reiterated, multiple times throughout her life. I think what was more important for us, and we're a multi-generational and multicultural family. It is knowing all the aspects of her history and my kids' history and those important figures. So I think we invest very heavily in also that part of the education. We don't leave it up to the schools, just only the schools. I think we're really heavily invested in educating them as well. So,
Rolando, there's one question in here that I'd like to hear you respond to. It's somewhat of a difficult question, given sort of the tenor of the conversation so far. But this person said, and again, feel free to answer it however you feel, appropriate. As a woman of color, I feel somewhat disappointed by this conversation. It feels to me like the statements are making it comfortable for white people to be in this conversation. That in itself feels like being part of systems of oppression. Rolando says things are fine, but he can't go for ice cream in Claremont. That's a big issue. I personally don't go to North Claremont as it is more conservative and I don't feel safe. I was stopped by a police officer and I was also afraid, very afraid by it. It felt threatening. Also in downtown Claremont, I have encountered personally white supremacists that have made me feel unsafe here. There are also issues of class and race that are connected to that. And I thought that, you would probably be interested in hearing that response, and you might have some thoughts in response to something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm appreciative for whoever wrote that. I guess I'd want to clarify. I'm not sure that I ever said that things were fine. I see the potential. I certainly think there are elements that are good, but I see the potential right in this city. Again, part of my service is to hear and to help in those areas where people within our community have had these type of experiences. Because I think that's what helps move the city forward is dealing with those. I absolutely agree. There are places where I do not feel comfortable. There are things that have happened to me in this city that are the basis of it. So again, I wouldn't characterize the city as being fine and perfect by no means. But again, is there the potential to do those to make it great by addressing these type of things? Absolutely. So to that comment, this is why I'm here, is definitely get a hold of me offline and let's talk about that. If there are grievances and those type of things, those are the type of things I'd like to hear so that I can help within my capacity as a police commissioner and just as a concerned citizen of Claremont to be able to participate and help with those issues. So that's what I would encourage that individual to do.
Thanks, Rolondo.
Okay, the questions are coming up now. We have a question, and it sort of follows on to what we've been talking about. Safety is a major issue. You said that you don't want your children to be able, you want your children to be able to travel throughout Claremont without fear. Have you had the talk with your children? And then the next follow-up, that the talk, for those people who do not know what the talk is, I have two sons, one's 30 and one's 37, and they grew up with my husband in Oakland, California, and we definitely had the talk when they became middle schoolers, and maybe even before then. And then the question, how do the police and school staff treat African-American children, adults, and men of color? So was that kind of clear? Or, I mean, it was...
Yeah, I mean, so I guess addressing the first part, the talk, is something that's always sitting there in the back of my head. I have not, if I'm being honest, I have not had that conversation. I think there have certainly been conversations about equity, inclusiveness. If you've seen us around town with our family, we're kind of an eclectic group. So if you ever see us coming, we are. But making sure that we address and confront those type of things in its space, I think is important for our children to see. Again, sort of being from a military law enforcement background, I think my kids have a certain sort of sense of a lot of those type of things. But no, we haven't had that talk yet. But I think it's one that, every family ends up having at one point or another. The second piece, remind me one more time what the second part of that was.
I think it was, okay, how do police and school staff treat African-American children, adults, and men of color? Maybe you could talk a little bit, I don't know if you can talk about what kind of training or what kind of interventions the police, with your service on the commission.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't talk to specific, specific trainings. These are, the officers that are in our schools are sworn officers. That is one of the things. So if you had an opportunity to listen into the last police commission meeting, we did talk about the resource officers, and I do know that that's going to be an ongoing conversation that we'll have on the commission, is taking a look at, at exactly this is the role of the resource officer. Why are they there? We have heard, parents and students, relay their concerns about having an armed officer on campus, and incidents relating to men, particularly of color. Again, those are the type of things, we said it during our commission meeting, those are the type of things that, and one of the reasons why I'm so happy to do this is that we want to put ourselves out there as commissioners so that we can get this information, to kind of take a step back and explain a little bit about what members of the commission are. We are your representatives in working with the chief and the police department. And so we're there to represent the things that are going on that you're experiencing. We're there to review policy. We're there to be a representative of the community, of the greater community. And so in order to help us do our jobs, that's the type of information that we need to understand a little bit better. So yeah, that is one of the things that came out of our last commission meeting, is to really take a look, provide recommendation, and do some reexamination as to the role of the resource officer in schools, and take a look at that a lot closer. So that's definitely on our radar.
Okay. Derik, there were a couple more questions. Are we?
Yeah, I have a couple more as well.
Oh, well, maybe you have the same ones.
I'm not sure. I think they have to either send them questions to me or to you.
Oh, I get it. Okay. Well, why
Might
don't
be
you
getting
go ahead.
different
Go ahead with
questions.
your two. I can.
Yeah, we're coming at you from all different angles here, Rolondo. Another question was interesting. Are there stores in the village that are more inclusive than others? And this person said, as Latinos, there are certainly stores that we avoid.
Yes. I'm going to go any deeper than that. I'll put it to you like this. As I said before, representation matters, right? And so, if my wife and I can go into a restaurant and you hear, out of a comedy movie, the record scratch, right? As everybody stops and turns around, probably not the most comfortable feeling place we're going to go. As everybody kind of stares at us as we walk in there. Certainly, there are places that we frequent and we support in the village because, again, we feel welcome. We didn't feel the proverbial record scratching and everybody turning around and staring at us the entire time while we're in the restaurant. Certainly, I'm not going to lie there. So yeah, there's definitely places where I think we go. I think there's definitely places where we've had negative experiences and we've decided, that those aren't type of places where we feel welcome, where we feel like that's a place we can, be ourselves, wear the t-shirt, if you will, going back to my analogy. So certainly.
Did you have a question, Cynthia, that you wanted to?
Yeah, there was a question about, I'm curious about the spaces created for different dynamics. Examples, spaces for youth to talk about their perspectives, a space for parents to share their thoughts and concerns on raising their children and wants they have for their children, etc. Are there such spaces in Claremont? If not, how do we go about creating these spaces? And if there are, how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a great question because, again, it's kind of my whole thing, right? We need to have more of these spaces. So I do think, there's a couple of ways I kind of look at it. There are a lot of spaces that not everybody knows about that are kind of out there in forms of things like commissions, right? So if you go on the city's website, there's a number of commissions that have to do with everything from the traffic to our trees, to human services, those type of things. So if those are the type of spaces that you're interested in belonging to and having a voice, those are definitely those type of spaces. I think what you guys are doing here There's a couple of others that I'm going to be involved in the next couple of weeks. That's what really makes me excited, is because they're homegrown and they're grassroots spaces that are being created. Because of, and it's just filling a need, right? I don't see this space, I'm going to create it, and the community gets together and rallies. That's, when I talk about potential, to me, that's like the perfect example, right? Is I don't see it, I'm going to create it. I'm not going to wait for somebody else to do it. I'm going to do it myself, and the community is going to support it. So yeah, I think definitely for those areas where, folks don't feel like their spaces, one of I think the great things about this city is that you can create those spaces, and you're going to have folks that support it.
I know one person, at least, Kayvon, you have your hand up. If everyone could if you could just drop your question into the chat, that would be easiest for us.
Yeah.
Has any other questions?
Yeah, there was one other one.
Okay.
For Rolando, why do you and your wife have to supplement the curriculum with Black history?
Yeah, very simply, it wasn't enough, in my opinion. I think there's, Black history is not relegated to a couple of events and a couple of people, right? I think there's so much more than we can fit in 28 days in February. And so, for me, the reason I wrote my books and the reason what we do for our kids is because of that. It's because, and it's an ongoing thing. Don't get me wrong. We're not supplementing just the 28 days. I think I just have an affinity of sort of the off the beaten path kind of knowledge. And so that fits in very well when it comes to talking about those type of things. Just because of who I am, I have a very sort of strong desire to know, things like military history, the first, Black this, the first Black that, is very, important to me. Those are the type of things I like to know about. And so, sometimes begrudgingly, I make my kids know it, but, they know it nonetheless, and they're gonna understand it. And so, I think that's what it's about. But I think that should be a given. I wouldn't necessarily, the way I see it, ever rely on the schools to be the only source of education, regardless of how good it is. I think as a parent, and exposing them to the world is also a great way to teach them as well.
Yeah, that you just reminded me of something. My son had to do one of those reports for Black History Month, and I made him research Matthew Henson, who went to the North Pole. And he said, "Mom, nobody knows who that is."
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's like, you're not going to see this, but this was pivotal in human history. And that story needs to be told too. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah. Derik, do you have any other questions there?
There was a couple other questions about the clothing analogy when you go out to work. I'll ask one of them, which again is a kind of more, I think, kind of on the personal side of things, where the person asked a sense of resentment about having to put on these sort of multiple layers of armor or protection, if you will. And then the person said, how do you overcome that feeling of resentment? I thought that was an interesting sort of question to ask there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the reason why the clothing analogy works for me is it's hot outside. I don't want to go with 15 layers of clothes on. I want to be cool and feel comfortable. So yeah, it does make me angry to have to do that or to feel the need to do that, because it shouldn't be that way. I would want us all to wear proverbial, whatever makes us feel comfortable, to be in that space. So yeah, it is frustrating. I don't, and I'll be completely honest, I don't know how to get over that. I mean, if you look at my bio, my whole entire professional career, I was always one of one or one of few. And so anything I ever did professionally, that is what I had to do in order to thrive in those spaces. So I think in a way, at this point in my career, I've just done it for so long that it's become sort of second nature. And it's only in those moments where, as I said before, I'm putting on 15 layers just to go walk, that I see the ridiculousness in it, that it sort of, you know, brings up something in me. But I honestly don't know. I think until we can get to a point where we can have more of these conversations, where we can, you know, have engagement and create, you know, an environment where, you know, we're building that community and that we get to know each other, you know, we can let our guards down. You know, I remember this one particular story where a friend of mine, a long time ago, we went into a restaurant, and just unbeknownst to him, he just had this face of just angst and anger in his face, but wasn't upset about anything, but it was just the stress of having to take in all these collective data points from around the room because we look different in that space. And so you realize sometimes it affects us all in very different ways. Sometimes we can't even control the way that it affects us. And so I think for all of us, there's this intense desire to not have to be that way, and figure out ways to not do it. But, you know, I don't know that I have. I think, you know, I think that's where we get terms like code switching and all those type of things, is because as specifically Black men, we internalize the fact that we've got to wear different costumes where we go, and you know, trying to figure out how not to have to do that is almost a full-time job.
Yeah, that's so deep. I mean, that we could spend the next hour unpacking that, because you know, I mean, I'm the daughter of San Francisco police. He was one of the first Black policemen in San Francisco, and so for his whole career, he had to wear the poem, we wear the mask. You know, he had to wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very similar to what you're talking about, the armor or the clothing that you have to put on just to be. But we have another question. This is from a white woman. I'm generally curious, as a white woman, what do you experience when you do not wear all the clothes? I really don't understand. Can you give me some specific examples?
Yeah, you don't let it happen twice. You know, I can say, you know, those few times where I felt safe and I felt there was the community, and I walked out in my t-shirt and my shorts and my flip-flops, I got hit with snowballs, right? I got hit with things that made me feel cold and immediately wanted me to put those things back on. You know, as Derik mentioned earlier, I wrote this piece for LinkedIn. You know, Claremont, I think, in my personal experience, it deals with a lot of what I call microaggressions, right? So it's not, I've never had anybody in Claremont, you know, do anything to me overtly racist. I know a lot of people have, but I've never had that experience. What I do experience are a lot of what I call these microaggressions, where it forces me to have to delve in, why did you say that, or why did you behave that way? And each time I ask those questions, or each time I have that experience, another layer of clothing goes back on. So and that then leads into trust and all those type of things that are the result of that. So I mean, that's the way I think I can clearly say it, is, you know, those environments and spaces where I've been told I would be accepted, and I could wear the t-shirt and shorts. You know, you get there and you're hit with a bunch of ice cubes and snowballs, you naturally retreat and want to find that warmth and that comfort of the layers of proverbial clothing that you put on. And that's you know, that's an everyday occurrence, you know. And so you then build up over time the idea or the strategy that I would rather go in over prepared and have this all built up, and be pleasantly surprised rather than go in there underprepared. And you know, that unfortunately is kind of status quo a lot of times.
Yeah, you know, it's so
that answers the question.
I'm looking at some of the questions. I'm just struck by the fact that this whole forum is called Claremont Speaks Black. And I understand completely what you've said, yet there are people who are listening who don't understand what you're saying and want specific examples. So I think,
Okay. Yeah.
you know, no, I'm not, I'm just an observation, okay? I'm not saying that as a qualitative comment. It's an observation that we clearly, Black people have a completely different experience, and there's things that we understand intuitively from that experience. So that's just an interesting observation. Derik, did you have, there was a couple more questions.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't mind addressing that though. If we want to stick on that, I don't mind talking about that at all, because I you know, this is here to help people understand. So if that helps, I'm all game for it.
Well, I mean, it's up to you. We have plenty of time. I think that it's just curious. It's just really interesting to me that that we're definitely talking Black here.
Yeah, well, you know, and I recognize analogies are tough. Yeah, no, you know, analogies can be tough sometimes because they require a certain frame of reference. I get it, and that's why I said, you know, it's tough to understand. I think, and I can just say for me, you know, see, not to get too personal, I think I would feel most comfortable on any given day, just walking around, going to Trader Joe's, wherever, not ironically, maybe in a pair of shorts, maybe a collared t-shirt, right? But I know that if I don't wear maybe something like I'm wearing today, that maybe I don't get the service that I'm due. One of my biggest just personal pet peeves that I've experienced specifically within my life and around Claremont, if you were asking for an example, if I put on a t-shirt and I don't look like the senior director of project management for Pomona College, I often am greeted by, "Hey man, what's up, man?" The gentleman right next to me wearing very similar things that happens to be white, it becomes "sir." And what can I do for you, sir? Right? That's a very small example of what I think, if that can resonate with some of you, a very small example of what I'm talking about. So what that communicates to me is that I have to work twice as hard to be called sir. So maybe the next time I don't wear a t-shirt, maybe the next time I wear a jacket, maybe the next time I do something differently because I want to be afforded that same respect as somebody else receives. That's a small example of what I talk about in terms of putting on extra clothes when going out of the house. I'm thinking of that scenario constantly. And if you can imagine the mental anguish that goes through having to do that, it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. And so that's just my lived experience is that's something that I'm constantly aware of, if that helps people understand it a little bit better. And it shouldn't be that way, in my opinion.
You know, these are excellent responses, Rolondo. And I think on the one hand, it's really so, it's very generous of you, right, to sort of come in and sort of speak on these issues in front of a majority white audience, right? And there are some people who are in the audience, you know, that we have here, who are pointing out the fact, right, that this in itself, right, is a kind of awkward dynamic, you could say. And some people would say that this is not the ideal dynamic, right, where Black people performatively speak, right, in front of white people for their education or edification, right? And so I think that this actually gets to part of like the difficulty of our dynamic, you know, in Claremont, right? I think, you know, if I lived where I grew up in the Caribbean, you know, we wouldn't have, obviously we wouldn't even be having this conversation, right? But one of the reasons that the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Claremont thought that this would be important, right, is that we are in a community where we have a vast majority of the residents who are white, and then a very small minority who are Black. And so some of the things that we thought would be necessary was to find people like Rolando who would be sort of brave enough to sort of share their experiences in this kind of context. And I think that we have to recognize kind of like both the difficulty and the kind of genius that is necessary to express oneself in a way in this kind of forum that allows you on the one hand to be authentic, but then on the other hand, not to be, let's say, the kind of person who's is going to put strains on relationships that are critical to forming community, right? And so I think, in all respect, I mean, Rolando has done an excellent, I think, a job of kind of like carrying out this sort of almost burdensome responsibility for the benefit of us all, really. And so, in that regard, I think it's really important to just sort of be very thankful to Rolando, but then also to sort of everyone comes away from this conversation with a self-reflection, right? With a capacity for understanding what is at stake for each of us who are involved in the conversation. And so once again, one might say that this is ironic because the burden is borne by the speaker here, by Rolando, much less so by those of us who are participating in the conversation. To me, it seems as though you can respond to that in a couple ways. You can say, well, we just don't have that conversation, or, right, we can come away from this kind of conversation and say, what now is my responsibility to my community to make it a place where these conversations are not necessary? And I think that, each of us is going to answer that in different ways. But nevertheless, I still think that it's important that, everyone here is commended for being here in this space, for participating in this kind of conversation. And of course, like most, especially Rolando, for not only just sharing his time, but for also kind of, bearing his soul to the degree that he can in this space for, our benefit. So, I mean, I think we wanted to keep it at right around an hour and a half, and we're there now. But I'm really excited about like us going forward from this space, right? I think that this is all a process of learning. There are changes that need to be made. Rolando has set us on the track that I think that we need to begin thinking about. And the more that we can develop this kind of dialogue and this kind of analysis in Claremont, I think the better it becomes for everyone. So I think, Cynthia, if you wanted to say anything else, I just want to give the last word to Rolando before we put up our announcement for the next session.
Right. I would feel amiss. There was one last question. It was more of an informational question from someone about networks for Black parents in Claremont. If that exists, if not, if we're just some more, information. But this has been a wonderful experience for me, Rolando, just hearing your wisdom and your insight and your experience has really helped me, and edified me in this discussion. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you for this experience. Thank you for the opportunity to hear me, to listen. And again, gosh, I sound like a broken record. I can hear it. So trust me, I hear myself repeating myself. I believe in this potential. I believe that the people who stuck around for this conversation, whether you agree with everything you heard or not, this is part of the conversation. This is what needs to happen. It's not always going to be fun and it's not always going to be comfortable, but that's how we move forward, and again, excites me in knowing that there's a potential within the city of Claremont to do this work, and that there's those that are out there that are willing to roll up their sleeves and move the city forward. And so I'm honored to be a part of that in any way that I can. So again, thank you for all those who attended. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to me ramble on for about an hour or so. But let's keep it going. Let's keep this going, right? Let's keep this conversation going. And then, I would personally like to see this conversation then take action and do something meaningful for the city. So.
Thank you so much again, Rolando. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have you speak with us. Really wonderful. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Close out. We're just going to show the information about the next gathering. I hope that you will join us. I hope that you will bring your friends to join us. And I hope that you've enjoyed this. Please feel free to email us with feedback that you might have, or in case you're interested in an invitation right before we have our next gathering, we can email you that as well. So I appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks for being here.